what if the steak on your plate isn't just a source of protein? What if it's actually a physical sponge that has soaked up the sheer terror an animal felt in its final
That's
moments?
a dark thought, right?
Very. Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are looking at this incredibly provocative essay from 2007 by a writer named Zufeng. It's titled, Can We Eat Meat?
Yeah, and it really goes to some unexpected places.
Oh, absolutely. But to set our mission right off the bat, this deep dive isn't about telling you what diet to follow. We are not, here to debate the perfect nutritional pyramid or hand out medical advice.
Right, no health directives here.
Exactly. Instead, we are exploring a very specific, deeply spiritual perspective on the energy, the hidden information, and even the invisible toxins contained in the food you consume.
It is a genuinely mind-bending text. I mean, it requires us to completely reframe what the act of eating actually represents.
Yeah.
But before we get too far into the weeds, we should explicitly note that the source material discusses various religious frameworks alongside a very specific spiritual philosophy known as Lifechanyuan.
Right, which we need to be clear about.
Yeah, exactly. To be clear to you listening, we are not endorsing any of these viewpoints or religions. We are simply unpacking the fascinating ideas presented in the text, basically acting as your guides to understand the underlying logic of this unique philosophical landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we look at the historical baseline the author lays out, humanity has clearly been agonizing over the morality of eating meat for, well, thousands of years.
Oh, for a very long time.
But it's not just about a simple right or wrong binary, is it? It seems to be driven by a really deep psychological anxiety.
Precisely. The author begins by surveying how major world religions have historically grappled with this, and he starts with Buddhism.
Right.
The strict Buddhist view is that eating meat is fundamentally cruel and it destroys life. But what's fascinating is the actual mechanism of fear that underpins this for some practitioners.
Yeah, this part was wild to me.
The text highlights a specific tradition where there is a very real, palpable fear that the animal you are consuming might actually be your own reincarnated parents or relatives.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around that. So, if you genuinely believe the consciousness of a loved one could be trapped in the body of, like a chicken or a cow,
Yeah.
abstaining from meat isn't just a dietary preference or even a broad statement on animal cruelty. It becomes a profound, immediate moral imperative to protect your own family.
That is exactly the kind of psychological weight the text points to. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But as a philosophy spreads to everyday people who aren't, living isolated ascetic lives in monasteries, absolute bans become difficult to enforce. You need practical compromises.
Right, you need some wiggle room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this leads to the Buddhist concept of the three clean meat.
Right, this is the rule where meat is permissible if it meets 3 strict conditions.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't killed specifically for you didn't kill it yourself, and you didn't witness the killing.
That's the one.
But if we dig into the why here, this feels less like a spiritual loophole and more like, I don't know, an attempted psychological compartmentalization.
It's entirely about creating a buffer of distance. You are intentionally severing yourself from the direct chain of causality.
Right.
If you didn't order the death, enact the death, or watch the death, the spiritual burden is theoretically diluted. And, geography plays a massive role in these rules, too.
Oh, for sure. Geography changes everything.
The text points out a fascinating exception within Tibetan Buddhism. In Tibet, the practitioners are mostly herdsmen living in really harsh environments. So beef and mutton are essentially the only staple foods available.
Right, because if they strictly adhered to a vegetarian diet at that altitude, they simply wouldn't survive. It just shows how even the strictest spiritual laws have to bend the sheer reality of human biology and environment.
Yes, survival necessity overrides the ban. And then, as the text moves westward into the Abrahamic religions, the focus shifts from avoiding meat to carefully managing how the animal dies.
Okay, so a shift in focus.
Right. For Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, and Orthodox churches, the text points out they do eat meat, but with a critical caveat. They only eat animals that have been intentionally killed, not animals that died naturally, like carrion.
Yeah, and the text specifically zeroes in on Jehovah's Witnesses and their strict forbidding of consuming blood.
Yes.
The underlying logic there is just striking. They interpret the blood, not the physical flesh, as the literal life of the animal.
It's a separation of the physical vessel from the animating life force. You can consume the vessel, but consuming the life force itself is taboo.
Fascinating.
And this brings us to Islam, which the author examines pretty closely. Islam strictly bans pork and carry, not just for physical health reasons, but because these things are considered unclean and will pollute a person's spiritual nature.
Right.
But the crucial detail the author emphasizes is the practice of killing the animal. Muslims chant scriptures before killing to console the animal and release its soul from purgatory.
See, this is such a pivotal concept. It implies that the animal isn't just a biological machine turning off.
No, not at all.
It has a soul that experiences distress, and humans have a duty to mitigate that distress. Think of these ancient dietary laws less like a restrictive menu and more like humanity's earliest attempt at creating an ethical supply chain for our spiritual well-being.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
Which feels like the perfect conceptual pivot into the core philosophy of this essay, Lifechanyuan. So what exactly is this philosophy, and how does it view the animal's soul?
So, Lifechanyuan is presented in the text as a spiritual philosophy focused on the origins, the levels, and the non-material structures of life.
Okay.
And its view on animals is deeply hierarchical. The philosophy posits that life in the universe is divided into clear levels of service. The core belief is that lower-level life is fundamentally meant to serve higher-level life.
So under this framework, human beings are the higher life and livestock are the lower life.
Correct. But here is the critical twist. Through the act of sacrifice, by serving a higher form of life, the lower life can actually escape its current limited plight.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Being consumed creates the energetic condition for that animal to reach a higher spiritual realm in its next incarnation.
Oh, wow. That's a huge reframing.
Because of this cosmic progression, the Lifechanyuan philosophy is completely neutral on the act of eating meat. It explicitly says it neither objects to nor supports it. It depends entirely on your own nature and your level of spiritual cultivation.
I am struggling to reconcile that. Wait, so on one hand, the text says we shouldn't kill animals we have affection for, like a crying cow. But on the other hand, it says lower life is meant to sacrifice itself to serve higher life. That is a fascinating tension.
That is the central tension of the entire essay. The author navigates it by arguing that just because a sacrifice is necessary doesn't mean the violence of the act shouldn't be mitigated.
Ah, I see.
To manage this tension, the text lays out 6 highly specific principles for eating meat. And if we look closely, these rules naturally group together around a few core themes. The first theme is maintaining that buffer of violence we talked about earlier.
Right. One of the rules is, basically, let professionals do the killing. The text argues that ordinary people shouldn't slaughter animals because, well, we are clumsy, we hesitate, and we end up prolonging the animal's pain.
Exactly. A professional makes it instantaneous. And tying into that buffer of violence is the rule specifically for Chanyuan celestials, which is the term the text uses for followers of this philosophy.
Got it.
A Chanyuan celestial is allowed to eat meat, but they must never physically kill the animal themselves, and they must never watch the killing happen. It's an exact parallel to that Buddhist 3 clean meat concept.
So you have to protect your own spiritual structure from the trauma of dealing death.
Yes.
The second underlying theme of these rules seems to be about honoring emotional bonds and spiritual nature. For instance, there was a strict ban on eating wild animals.
Right, to protect the delicate chain of life from being artificially severed by human interference.
But then it gets deeply personal when it talks about domestic animals.
It does. The author strictly forbids eating dog meat. The rationale is that dogs possess a very high spiritual nature. The philosophy argues that the higher the spiritual nature of the creature you consume, the heavier the energetic damage will be to your own spiritual nature.
Like an energetic contagion.
Exactly.
And it extends to livestock, too. The author shares this incredibly vivid personal observation. He writes about looking into the eyes of cattle and seeing them actually shed tears before slaughter.
Yeah, that part is heavy.
He describes sheep looking visibly depressed and chickens showing clear affection toward the humans who feed them. The text argues that if you have carefully raised an animal and felt that bond, you simply cannot bear to kill it.
Exactly. You are only supposed to eat animals specifically raised for the purpose of food, and even then you must chant scriptures, borrowing from the Islamic tradition we mentioned, to console them and minimize their suffering at the end.
Okay, so all these intricate rules dictate what we put on our plate and how it gets there. But once we swallow it, what is actually happening inside our bodies? Because the author clearly doesn't view a steak as just a collection of proteins and fats.
Not at all. The author sums up the internal mechanism with a very powerful quote. He says, "Eating vegetables makes one sober. Eating meat makes one be muddled. Eating grains makes one wise, and eating qi makes one deity-like.
We're definitely going to talk about eating qi in a minute. That's fascinating. But let's look at the mechanism of eating meat first. The text makes a clear distinction. The moment an animal dies, its meat is no longer life. It becomes pure energy.
It is a transfer of state. However, this philosophy argues that all energy has a specific non-material structure, and that structure contains information.
Information. Like data.
Sort of. When you eat, you aren't just digesting calories. You are absorbing the information encoded in that specific food.
The text gives some very tangible biological examples of this concept of food as information. It points out that if you eat poultry infected with bird flu, the information of the virus transfers into your biology.
Right.
If you eat a plant called croton, its specific energy structure violently disrupts your system and causes loose bowels. If you eat a chili pepper, its structure makes you sweat and feel unbearably hot. The food is actively dictating your physical reality.
And here is where we reach the most crucial concept in the entire essay. If food transfers biological information like heat or illness, it also transfers emotional information.
Okay.
The text introduces the concept of the anger toxin.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like the text is saying you aren't just eating physical matter, you are downloading the animal's final emotional state like a corrupted file directly into your own body.
That is the exact mechanism. Think about the moment an animal was forced into a slaughterhouse. It feels profound terror, indignation, and resentment. The author argues that these intense negative emotional states cause the animal's physical body to release a literal toxin that permeates its muscles. When you eat that meat, you are absorbing that fear toxin.
Wow.
The hate and panic of the animal are transferred to you, and those dark instincts begin to operate within your own non-material structure.
The author even asks the reader to conduct a little thought experiment on themselves to prove this mechanism is real. Like, think about what happens when you get blindingly enraged. Your heart races, your hands shake, and your face might literally turn pale or blue.
Right, a physical reaction.
According to the text, this visual physical change happens because your anger has triggered the release of toxins inside your own body.
It's a human proof of concept. If our own human emotions can generate physical toxins that alter our skin color and biology, the author reasons that an animal facing its own violent death is generating a massive, catastrophic amount of toxins from its terror.
It makes a terrifying kind of sense.
That is the true hidden danger of eating meat, according to this philosophy. It's not about cholesterol. It's about continuously dosing yourself with invisible anger toxins.
So if we are living in a modern world where we occasionally eat meat, and that meat is potentially loaded with the crystallized terror of the animal, are we just doomed? How do we protect our internal structure? What is the antidote?
The philosophy provides a very accessible, functional antidote, actually. Gratitude.
Gratitude. You mean just like saying thank you to the food? That sounds a bit too simple to cure a fear toxin.
It goes much deeper than polite table manners. The text claims that feeling a genuine, profound sense of gratitude actually alters the energetic structure of the food. It neuters the anger toxin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the author states that this is the deep, hidden mechanism behind why Christians pray and say grace before a meal. It isn't just a ritual to please God. It is a functional, consciousness-driven process to alter the food structure so it benefits your health rather than poisoning your spirit.
So what does this all mean for you? Think about the idea that saying thank you for a meal isn't just good manners, but a functional tool to literally alter the physical structure of your food. It completely changes the dynamic of sitting down to dinner.
It empowers the eater. You aren't just a passive receptacle for toxins. Your consciousness interacts with the energy. But the philosophy pushes us to look even deeper into the nature of consumption.
Okay, how so?
It asks a fundamental structural question. Why does a wolf naturally crave meat while a sheep strictly eats grass?
According to the text, it has nothing to do with conscious choice. It is determined entirely by their internal structure of life.
Yes, and humans have our own internal structure. The text explains that if a person engages in self-cultivation, meaning they actively work on their spiritual development and expand their consciousness, their non-material structure actually begins to physically shift.
And what happens when that non-material structure changes? Like practically speaking.
The author is adamant that you shouldn't force yourself to stop eating meat. You shouldn't try to muscle through a strict, miserable diet through willpower alone. Willpower fails.
Sure does.
Instead, as your non-material structure perfects itself through spiritual cultivation, your body will naturally begin to reject lower frequency energy. You will organically grow disgusted by meat.
Disgusted?
Yeah, the text says you might eventually vomit at the sight of it, or feel sick just smelling it because your refined internal structure no longer aligns with the dense energy of a dead animal.
It's an effortless transition driven by internal evolution rather than external restriction.
Yeah.
The author seems very critical of standard dieting, actually, stating that dieting is mainly just a habit of thinking.
Exactly. And if you use unconventional, non-form thinking, you can transcend these habits entirely. Which brings us back to that phrase from earlier, eating qi is godlike.
All right.
The ultimate goal presented in this text isn't to become a perfect vegan. The pinnacle of this philosophy is to eventually eat nothing physical at all.
Wait, eating nothing.
Yeah.
Just to clarify for those unfamiliar, Qi is a traditional concept in Eastern philosophy referring to the vital life force or energy that flows through everything in the universe.
Yes, the pure energy of existence. The text asks a highly logical question based on its own internal premises. If all physical food is just a localized conversion of energy, and we eat solely to absorb that energy to keep our bodies running, why use food as a middleman?
Wow, okay.
Right. Why endure the toxins and the karma?
Now, if you're listening to this on your morning commute, you're probably rolling your eyes thinking, if I try to just absorb Qi from the sun instead of eating lunch today, I'm going to pass out at my desk. And biologically, yes, you will.
Definitely do not skip lunch.
But what is the author actually getting at here? The text proposes directly assimilating the essence of the sun, the moon, and the anima of the earth.
The author's talking about an ultimate state of evolutionary transcendence. If you possess the right spiritual key, which the author defines as the perfect alignment of consciousness, structure, and energy, you can theoretically absorb cosmic energy directly.
That is wild.
You bypass the messy, violent physical food web entirely. It is a radical leap. We've moved from how to minimize a chicken's suffering to how to absorb the raw energy of a star.
But just as things get incredibly cosmic,
Yeah.
the essay forcefully pulls us back down to earth for its conclusion. It introduces a concept that grounds all of this in our daily reality, energetic debt.
Yes.
We often talk about paying our debts to society or the bank, but this philosophy insists that we owe massive tangible debts to nature and to the plant kingdom.
This is perhaps the most profound takeaway from the Lifechanyuan perspective. The author asks, why should we hold life and nature in awe? Why should we bother protecting the environment?
Usually people say it's because it's the right thing to do.
Right, but the text explicitly states that the purpose of protecting nature is not for the sake of human morality. We don't protect the earth because it proves we are good people. We protect it to pay back our cosmic tab.
It's an energetic bank account. Every time we take from the earth, whether it's eating a plant, drinking water, or consuming an animal, we're making a withdrawal of energy. And the universe keeps a strict ledger. We owe a debt for that energy.
It is entirely transactional. The text claims that in modern times, humanity has overdrawn its account drastically. And according to the author, the absolute best way to begin paying off this overwhelming cosmic debt is to build the philosophy of Lifechanyuan on Earth.
Okay.
The reasoning behind that specific claim requires deep personal contemplation, but the through line of the entire essay is crystal clear. Our relationship with food, with animals, and with nature is an intricate, inescapable web of energy exchange.
If we zoom out and look at the journey this text has taken us on, we started by analyzing the psychological buffers ancient religions created to manage the spiritual weight of killing.
Yeah, the 3 clean meat, the scripture chanting.
We explored the idea that life is an endless hierarchy of service and sacrifice. We dug into the deeply unsettling mechanism of anger toxins, where an animal's fear physically rewrites our own biology.
That's the one that's going to stick with me.
Same. We looked at how gratitude might act as an energetic purifier. And finally, we explored the ultimate goal of bypassing physical consumption to become beings of pure energy, all while trying to balance our cosmic checkbook with nature.
It completely dismantles the idea of passive consumption. It demands that we become hyper-conscious participants in the transfer of energy, acutely aware of the emotional and spiritual history embedded in whatever we choose to consume.
Even if you aren't trying to eat Qi or absorb the sun's essence today, this text completely reframes how you might look at your next meal. It asks you to consider the unseen energy, the information, and the history embedded in what is on your plate. The author says we hold life and nature in awe, not out of morality, but simply to pay back a cosmic debt. So the next time you step outside, ask yourself, are you acting out of human goodness, or are you just paying off your tab to the universe? Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We will catch you next time.